Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. On February 23rd, 2018, a quiet town in Odisha was shaken by an explosion. In the house of a young married couple, barely having time to celebrate their wedding, there was a loud crash heard even on the neighboring streets. At first, everyone assumed a gas cylinder had burst. But it very quickly became clear this was not an accident. It was a carefully planned act. Who brought a package into that home with a deadly gift? And why did the victim end up being a family that, just the day before, was receiving congratulations and making plans for the future? Soumya Shekhar Sahu was born and raised in Odisha, in a family of teachers. By the age of 26, he had finished a degree in computer science and taken a position as a software engineer with a company that worked with Japanese tech firms. His colleagues noted his discipline and drive. He was the kind of person who stayed in the office longer than others when the work demanded extra effort. To his family, he had become a symbol of pride and hope, as the young professional was proving he could achieve more than just a regional career. Rima Sahu, his fiancée, was 4 years younger. She studied foreign languages and dreamed of a career in translation. From early childhood, she lived in her uncle's home, who became her adoptive father, despite already having several sons. This detail of her life did not lead to isolation or hardship. Instead, she was raised in an environment of care. Rima was always described as open, easy to talk to, and kind. Her smile was often the first thing people remembered upon meeting her. In the groom's house, a central figure was his great-grandmother, Jenamani. She was 85 and remained surprisingly active for her age. She didn't just observe family life. She took part in everything, helping in the kitchen, offering advice, trying to be useful. Her presence created a sense of stability and continuity. To Soumya, she was more than just an elderly relative. Her words often proved decisive during family discussions. Soumya's father, Rambindra, taught zoology at a university. He was a calm man, passionate about science, having devoted his life to teaching and research. His wife, Sanjakuta, had made her own path in education and eventually became the director of a college. In their home, knowledge, discipline, and respect for hard work were highly valued. For their son, they had built a stable foundation, one that allowed him to quietly craft his own future. Against this backdrop stood a man who was not part of the family, but who would play a fateful role. Punjilal Meher was a professor in the same academic community as Soumya's mother. Until 2014, he himself held the position of director, but he lost it, and the event hit him hard. What wounded him especially was the fact that the person who replaced him was a woman, Sanjakuta. For Meher, losing the directorship became a deeply personal defeat, and the feeling of humiliation did not fade with time. His colleagues knew he often expressed his dissatisfaction, but no one suspected that this internal conflict would grow into obsession. These people became connected through a single story, one that began as a family celebration and ended in tragedy. Their lives followed different paths: young adults full of hopes for the future, an elderly woman who symbolized care and tradition, proud parents, and a professor whose jealousy turned into something deeply destructive. The engagement was formalized in March 2017 and lasted until February of the following year. The wedding date was chosen only after extensive discussions with both extended families and consultation with an astrologer who identified the most favorable days for the ceremony. Since the families had known each other for years, there was no conflict during the talks. They agreed the wedding would follow traditional customs and that both sides would equally share the costs and planning duties. Preparations took months and moved at a steady pace. A venue was booked, catering selected, and arrangements were made with a photographer and musicians. Invitations were ordered, decorations for the house picked out, and fabrics for ceremonial outfits chosen. Elders insisted that rituals be followed to the letter, from the exchange of gifts between the families to formal pre-wedding visits and the proper regional layout of the wedding hall. Every detail was double-checked to avoid breaking tradition. During this time, the soon-to-be married couple rarely met in private. Most of their communication happened in the presence of family or over the phone. Their conversations were practical: how they would split responsibilities after the wedding, plans for housing, discussions about work and education. Despite the limited interaction, a quiet sense of trust gradually grew between them. As the date drew closer, wedding tasks picked up speed. A schedule was drawn up to coordinate out-of-town relatives, accommodations were arranged, and seating for the reception was finalized. The groom's house was cleaned and reorganized. Some rooms were cleared to hold gifts, others were prepared as rest areas for guests arriving from afar. Responsibilities were divided among relatives. Some would greet the guests, others would handle transportation or oversee the kitchen. At the same time, the couple discussed their future. The groom planned to focus on career advancement and join major tech projects. The bride aimed to complete her degree and use her language skills in a professional setting. Eventually, they considered moving into their own place, but only after a transitional period. They agreed to make financial decisions together with full transparency and shared responsibilities. Their early priorities included handling paperwork, organizing joint bank accounts, and streamlining daily routines. By February 2018, every preparation had come together into a master plan, with specific schedules for arrivals, rituals, and meals. Both families felt the pressure, but it was mixed with confidence. Everything was in place, and the wedding was expected to go off without a hitch. On February 18, 2018, the Sahu and Sekar families gathered to formally unite the lives of two young people. The ceremony followed local traditions. Sumya and Rima were at the center of it all, but elders stayed close by to ensure each step of the process was performed correctly. 2 days later, on February 20th, the main reception took place. It was a large-scale celebration, organized not just for relatives, but for neighbors, co-workers, and family friends as well. Dozens of people attended. Many traveled in from out of town just to be there. The family had prepared an extensive traditional menu, hired musicians, and decorated the venue with bright fabrics. The reception turned into a public event that people in the region were talking about. To many, the marriage was a symbol of both families' standing and a reflection of the respect they had earned through years of dedication and hard work. After the celebrations, the newlyweds didn't go on a honeymoon. According to cultural customs, the first few days after the wedding are spent in the groom's family home. For Sumya and Rima, this meant living in a large house where his parents, great-grandmother, and close relatives were always around. Their first days together were under the watchful eyes of the elders, but this wasn't seen as restrictive. In fact, it was considered a normal, even essential part of starting a married life, with the family's support close at hand. Each morning began with shared breakfasts, during which the elders gently guided Rima on how to run the household. She learned what dishes were expected on different days, how to welcome guests, and how responsibilities should be managed. For Sumya, these days confirmed that Rima was ready to integrate into his family's life. While the couple didn't have much time alone, the structured environment was understood as a sign of respect toward tradition. There was a cheerful mood in the house. Guests who had missed the reception continued to drop by, offering gifts and warm wishes. Boxes and bags, often accompanied by handwritten cards, were stacked in a separate room, and new ones arrived every day. Every visit felt like part of an extended celebration that stretched well beyond the wedding day. These 5 days passed in an atmosphere of unity and care. Relatives saw the marriage as the start of a new chapter for two young people, and neighbors often commented that the rare mix of Sumya's quiet determination and Rima's outgoing nature made their match particularly strong. It seemed like nothing could disturb the sense of harmony and joy that had settled in. All signs pointed toward a stable and successful future together. On the morning of February 23, 2018, everything in the Sekhar family home felt calm. Sumya's parents were out on errands, and inside the house were just Sumya, his wife Rima, and his great-grandmother Janamani. By noon, the atmosphere was routine. The couple chatted about small household matters while the elderly woman sat nearby. There was no indication that this day would turn their world upside down. Around 12:45 p.m., a delivery driver showed up at the front door. In his hands was a medium-sized parcel, neatly wrapped in brown cardboard and tied with a ribbon. The address was correct, but the sender's name raised some eyebrows. It read, S.K. Sarara, followed by the name of a city located several hours away. No one in the house recognized the name, but given the flood of wedding gifts and greetings they'd received lately, no one thought much of it. Sumya signed for the package and brought it inside. All three of them were in the room when it happened. The young husband placed the box on the table and began peeling back the outer layer of wrapping. Beneath it was another box, this one more decorative, like a gift meant specifically for a joyous occasion. There was nothing unusual on the surface except for a single white wire poking out from under the lid. It looked like part of the wrapping or maybe a fastening string. Sumya noticed the wire and instinctively tried to tuck it away to open the box more neatly. The moment he pulled on it, the mechanism triggered. In an instant, a muffled pop turned into a deafening explosion. Flames shot out across the room, and the air was instantly choked with heat and smoke. The blast wave was so powerful that the entire house shook. Plaster rained from the ceiling, and window glass shattered outward. The noise echoed through nearby streets, sending neighbors running from their homes, assuming it was a gas line accident. But the destruction wasn't from any household mishap. It came from a carefully constructed homemade device, disguised as a wedding present. That moment, when Sumya pulled the wire, became the point of no return. What seemed like a harmless piece of ribbon was actually a detonator. In just seconds, a home filled with celebration turned into a scene of devastation. Neighbors, still unaware of what had truly happened, rushed to the gate. Inside, 3 members of the household lay injured from the blast. Sumya was on the floor, barely moving. His skin was scorched, his clothes charred, his breathing ragged. He tried to speak, gasping out words about the pain, about fear, but he had almost no strength left. Nearby, Rima lay injured. Her face and arms had been burned by the fire. Her chest and abdomen were badly affected. She struggled to crawl across the floor, clawing through debris in search of breathable air in the thick smoke. Janamani, the great-grandmother, had suffered the most severe injuries. Flames had engulfed much of her body, and she was barely responsive, clinging to life by a thread. Outside, the neighborhood was in chaos. Residents had poured into the street, thinking a gas tank had exploded. Some shouted about a fire, others called for help. No one knew exactly what had happened, and confusion quickly spiraled into panic. A few brave individuals pushed into the house and were met with a harrowing scene. The floor was littered with debris, part of the ceiling had collapsed. 3 people lay wounded, covered in burns and injuries. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and chemicals. It was clear this wasn't some routine accident. Calls were made to emergency services, but no one waited for help to arrive. Men from nearby homes used whatever they could find, sheets, wooden beams, to create makeshift stretchers. They moved fast, knowing every second mattered. Victims were carried out carefully, with urgency but as gently as possible. Outside, the crowd grew. Some tried to clear a path, shouting for space. Others were frantically dialing relatives. Cries mixed with the noise, the panic, the confusion. Women sobbed. Men tried to stay focused, but the situation was slipping into the unthinkable. The first victims were laid out at the gate, directly on the ground. Soon, someone brought a vehicle to take them to the hospital, not willing to wait for the ambulance. Sumya groaned in pain. Rima was barely able to breathe. Janamani was unconscious. At that moment, no one could say who would make it and who wouldn't. The 3 victims were rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors immediately admitted them to the critical care unit. Medical staff knew the odds of survival were slim. The severity of the injuries varied, but each case required urgent, intensive intervention. Jenna arrived in extremely critical condition. Over 90% of her body had been burned. Doctors worked to stabilize her breathing and blood pressure, but her elderly body couldn't handle the trauma. Within hours of being admitted, her heart stopped. Despite resuscitation attempts, there was nothing more they could do. The news of her passing spread quickly, deepening the shock and fear among the family. Soumya was still breathing, but his injuries were catastrophic. Most of his body had sustained third-degree burns, and internal organs were severely damaged by the intense heat. The medical team did everything possible. He was placed on ventilators and monitored closely, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. Just a few hours after arrival, he was pronounced dead. The death of a 26-year-old man, whose future had seemed so bright just days earlier, left a lasting silence in the ward. Rima was the only one with a fighting chance. About 40% of her body had been burned. Her hands, chest, parts of her face, and abdomen were seriously affected. Doctors made the decision to place her in a medically induced coma to ease the strain on her body and give her the best chance at recovery. She remained unconscious for several days, kept alive with machines and round-the-clock monitoring. When her condition stabilized, doctors slowly began bringing her out of the coma. The first hours were extremely difficult: disorientation, pain, overwhelming weakness. Rima had no idea what had happened. She didn't yet understand the scale of the tragedy. The medical team, hoping to protect her emotional state, chose not to tell her about the deaths of her husband and great-grandmother, at least, not right away. But the truth found its way to her anyway. A few days after she regained consciousness, Rima was handed a newspaper. On the front page was a full article about the explosion, complete with photographs. Her name was there, her husband's name, along with details no one had yet shared with her. Her reaction was immediate: screams, tears, despair. The pain from the burns now mixed with the pain of unimaginable loss. Doctors had to step in quickly to keep her stable, both physically and emotionally. For the family, this marked the beginning of a long, painful vigil outside the hospital walls. Soumya's parents were caught between mourning their son and caring for their daughter-in-law, who was still fighting for her life and would need months of treatment. His father personally managed interactions with the press, doing everything he could to shield the family from the wave of journalists. But the media attention couldn't be stopped completely. The story had already gripped the public. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, interviewing anyone connected to the family, spinning theories about the cause of the explosion. Every day, newspapers and TV broadcasts featured updates on the tragedy, speculating on police missteps, security failures, and possible motives behind the attack. Public pressure on law enforcement intensified. People demanded swift justice, believing that an attack on Newlyweds, an act that had taken multiple lives, could not go unanswered. Under mounting public pressure, the investigation picked up speed. Soumya's family publicly demanded justice, and media outlets began raising serious concerns about safety and how packages were screened. Each day that Rima spent in the burn unit became another headline, her story evolving into a symbol of injustice, one the community believed needed to be made right. The hospital was no longer just a place for healing. It had become the center of a larger reckoning. It was where private grief collided with public outrage, where a family's personal nightmare met society's urgent demand for accountability. Back in the spring of 2017, nearly a year before the wedding, Soumya was away on a work trip. One evening, he was on the phone with Rima, chatting about everyday things. In the middle of their conversation, a second call came through. He apologized, briefly switched lines, and came back clearly shaken. He told Rima that a man, someone he didn't know, had just warned him, "Don't get married, or there will be consequences." The voice spoke in the local dialect, the tone unmistakably threatening, but the caller gave no further explanation. Later, Soumya mentioned the incident to his father. His dad brushed it off, chalking it up to a prank or a bad joke. The topic quickly faded from conversation, and no one in the family thought about it again, until after the February 2018 explosion. Investigators reopened those old memories and began connecting the dots. The first line of inquiry focused on a possible former admirer of Rima's. In tight-knit communities, past relationships are often seen as potential sources of tension. Investigators soon confirmed that before her engagement, Rima had indeed been involved with someone who had struggled to accept her decision to marry someone else. The possible motive? Jealousy and wounded pride. Detectives began digging deeper. They pulled phone records to trace the warning call from March 2017. Simultaneously, they started combing through social media accounts, looking at posts, comments, and private messages. The hope was to find anything that hinted at threats or hidden intentions. The ex-boyfriend was brought in for questioning. Investigators asked about the timing of the call, the nature of his relationship with Rima, and how he reacted when he learned of her engagement. The young man denied any involvement. He insisted that after their breakup, he had moved on and made no effort to interfere in her life. Investigators cross-checked his alibi, reviewing his call history and tracking his location at the time. The review lasted several weeks. Investigators interviewed his circle of friends, analyzed his digital footprint, and looked into whether he had access to or had tried to purchase components that could be used in a homemade explosive. But no direct evidence emerged. His call logs, online activity, and real-world movements didn't link him to the February attack in any conclusive way. This early phase of the investigation made it painfully clear just how complex the case would be. That ominous warning, delivered nearly a year before the wedding, remained a haunting clue. But it didn't point to any one person. Detectives realized they were dealing with a far wider pool of potential suspects than they'd initially believed. And more disturbingly, the true motive behind the tragedy might have had nothing to do with Rima's personal past at all. Just when investigators were closing in on the theory involving Rima's former admirer, an anonymous letter arrived at the police station, and it changed everything. Right away, the letter stood out. It was written entirely in English, with a polished, articulate tone, an advanced vocabulary, and complex sentence structure. In a region where most communication happened in local dialects, this level of fluency pointed to someone highly educated. That detail didn't go unnoticed. It became the first major clue for linguistic analysis. But the letter's content was even more unusual and contradictory. The writer claimed the tragedy was the result of something called a project. According to the message, there were 3 individuals involved, and their actions had been planned in advance. The very term project felt strange in the context of a criminal investigation. It wasn't something that appeared in local media or official reports. It sounded more academic, like the kind of term someone in research or academia might use. The letter also included information that hadn't been made public. It referenced specific details about how the package was delivered and what the wrapping looked like. One detail in particular grabbed the investigators' attention. Early media reports had stated that the name written on the package was S.K. Chararma, but the letter claimed the real name was S.K. Sarahra, a detail that matched what only law enforcement officials had seen. That correction was critical. It meant the author had access to confidential evidence, something no outsider or casual observer could have known. It was a flashing red light for investigators. The letter came from someone directly connected to the planning or even execution of the crime. Even more telling, the letter appeared to be trying to steer the investigation off course. The writer insisted that the police were wasting their time, pointed toward alleged infidelities and interpersonal conflicts, and implied a different motive entirely. But the tone felt deliberate, too careful. It was clear this was an attempt to mislead authorities wrapped in intellectual language. In trying to confuse the investigation, the writer had essentially revealed their own involvement. A linguistic analysis of the letter confirmed the writing style was academic, laced with terms common among professionals in education or research. It wasn't the voice of a casual speaker. It was structured, strategic, and unmistakably intentional. Investigators concluded that the author was someone highly educated with professional-level English skills, far beyond conversational use. This letter quickly became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. It didn't just show that the person behind the attack was still watching, it also hinted at their need to control the narrative, to insert themselves into the investigation while trying to stay hidden. But their ego may have gotten the best of them. Now, police had a clear new direction. This wasn't a crime driven by impulse or jealousy. It was something far more methodical. Behind the tragedy was someone experienced, someone using their intellect to both cover their tracks and take silent credit for what they'd done. After carefully reviewing the letter, investigators made the decision to share it with Soumya's family. Specifically, they brought it to his mother, Sanjakuta. As an academic herself, with years of experience in the education sector, she was well acquainted with the language and style often used by colleagues in her field. She read the letter carefully, studying not just the words, but the sentence structure, the use of complex expressions, and the precise choice of terminology. Within minutes, Sanjakuta made a confident statement. The writing style felt familiar. In her opinion, the author was clearly someone from an academic background, someone fluent in English at a teaching level and capable of framing even casual thoughts in overly formal academic language. What she said next became the turning point of the entire investigation. Sanjakuta directly named one person, Professor Punjalal Meher. She explained that she had known his writing style for years, overly academic, rigidly formal, full of excessive terminology, always trying to assert intellectual superiority. Everything in the anonymous letter matched exactly what she had seen from him before. For the investigators, this wasn't just a theory, it was a breakthrough. Up until now, their focus had remained on Rima's former admirer, but that lead had stalled. There was no hard evidence, no solid connection to the bombing. But this was different. Now they had a new potential suspect, someone close to the family, someone with access to private information, and someone educated enough to craft a letter like this. Investigators began lining up the facts. Professor Mayer had once held a prominent position. He'd served as the college director before being replaced by none other than Sanjakuta. The loss of that role had reportedly hit him hard. Combined with the content of the anonymous letter, the motive now looked far more personal and far more plausible than the previous theory. One word in the letter stood out more than any other: project. That kind of language wasn't common in local communication. It was something you'd expect to hear in academic or research circles. To the investigators, it was a subtle but telling clue, one that pointed back to someone from a teaching or scholarly environment. After speaking with Soumya's family, investigators shifted the direction of the case. They began focusing on the professor's personal and professional life, examining his contacts, movements, and communications. It was the mother's recognition of that distinct writing style that launched this new phase of the investigation. From that moment on, Punjalal Meher was no longer just a name on the periphery. He had become the central suspect, and now law enforcement had a clear path forward. As suspicions against Professor Punjalal Meher intensified, investigators secured a warrant to search his home. The operation was conducted early in the morning to prevent any attempt to destroy evidence. And during the search, police uncovered a series of discoveries that directly linked him to the crime. The first major find was his personal laptop. Forensic analysts examined the hard drive and recovered a deleted draft of the same anonymous letter that had been sent to the police. Though partially wiped, experts were able to restore the file. The writing style matched exactly what investigators had previously reviewed. The digital footprint left no room for doubt. The letter had been written on that machine. The second piece of evidence was a flash drive hidden among educational materials. At first glance, it appeared empty, but forensic recovery revealed deleted data, including a backup of the same letter, plus notes filled with keywords and visual layouts. The contents suggested planning, intentional, calculated planning, and efforts to conceal it afterward. Then, investigators found a postal receipt in the house, issued in the name of S.K. Sarahra. The document confirmed that a package had been sent from a nearby town in February 2018. The details matched the courier service records already obtained by the police. This receipt became direct evidence tying the professor to the delivery of the deadly parcel. In the backyard, officers noticed a trash bin that stood out. Among the garbage were charred remains of fireworks. Forensic analysis confirmed that the components found were often used in homemade explosive devices. This discovery strongly suggested that the professor had been experimenting with pyrotechnic materials. Inside the bedroom, investigators found burned journals. Most of the pages had been destroyed, but fragments of writing survived. In them, the professor expressed deep resentment toward Sanjakuta, blaming her for his removal from the position of college director. He described his feelings of humiliation and anger. The writings made it clear. He saw his dismissal as a personal insult and a lasting wound to his pride. These emotional confessions gave investigators a window into his motive. Special attention was given to his online activity. On his laptop and browser history, digital traces showed visits to websites with instructions on constructing explosive devices. His search queries included phrases like, "how to build a homemade bomb," fireworks in devices, and detonation mechanisms. The logs revealed a pattern of deliberate research. He wasn't acting on a whim. He was studying step by step, and then applying that knowledge in real life. The search painted a full picture. This was no impulsive act. Mayer had been planning the attack over a long period. He systematically gathered information, tested materials, and went to great lengths to cover his tracks. Every item found, from the receipt to the scorched journals, formed a clear chain of evidence pointing straight to him. After the search, there was no doubt left in the investigators' minds. An educated man, once respected in his field, had orchestrated and executed a calculated attack that took the lives of Soumya and Janamani and left Rima forever changed. Back in February 2018, when Soumya and Rima were celebrating their wedding, Professor Punjalal Meher was among the guests. His presence didn't raise any red flags. He had professional ties to the family and was someone people expected to see at such an event. In the photos from that day, he looks calm, greeting acquaintances, blending in, participating in the ceremonies like everyone else. Nobody had any idea that this very man was already carrying out a plan that would soon turn into tragedy. His behavior didn't raise suspicion. He smiled, made small talk, and took part in the rituals. Looking back, investigators were stunned by his composure. The man who would later be accused of orchestrating the attack had been right there, in the middle of everything, without making a single mistake that might have given him away. After the explosion and the tragic loss of 2 family members, when the funerals were held, Professor Punjalal Meher showed up again, this time as a grieving acquaintance. He came offering condolences, speaking gently to the family, expressing his sorrow. His words sounded sincere. To everyone there, he was just a long-time family connection, someone sharing in their heartbreak. But in truth, he was the very source of that heartbreak. This role, of a mourner, of a caring guest, was part of his plan. He believed that by attending both the wedding and the funerals, he could deflect suspicion and present himself as someone with no motive at all. In the eyes of neighbors and colleagues, he remained a respected figure, someone grieving alongside the family, not the mastermind behind the devastation. Later, psychological analysis of his behavior revealed several defining traits. First, envy. Deep, simmering resentment had taken root after he lost his position as college director and was replaced by a woman, Sanjakuta, the mother of the groom. To him, it was a blow to his status and dignity. Second, a wounded ego. He couldn't accept the hit to his authority. He took the change as a personal insult, a stain on his professional identity. And third, a craving for retribution. This wasn't just about harboring resentment. He meticulously built a plan to strike back. Choosing to carry out the attack using a bomb showed not only a desire to cause harm, but to humiliate, to destroy a family by taking their son, and to obliterate the happiness they had built. His presence at both the wedding and the funeral came to symbolize his dual life. Calm and composed on the outside, calculated and dangerous underneath. Investigators later confirmed that the package had been intended for delivery during the wedding reception. Postal stamps and routing documents supported this. The parcel had arrived in town on February 20th and was assigned for delivery that same morning, marked urgent, deliver directly to recipient. According to courier protocols, if the home address is unavailable due to a known event, the delivery person is instructed to attempt handoff at the event location. By noon on February 20th, the venue was packed. Dozens of cars lined the street. Food and decorations were being unloaded and the place was buzzing. The courier pulled up to the gate, assessed the crowd, and decided against delivering the package in such a chaotic setting. His delivery device recorded a message: "Delivery postponed. Unsafe environment / high risk of loss." He returned the parcel to the local depot and notified dispatch. The following day, no one was available to reschedule the delivery due to ongoing festivities. The updated delivery note was stamped for February 23rd, with the recipient's home address as the new destination. The courier's statement matched surveillance footage from the event entrance. The footage showed him approaching the gate, speaking with staff, and turning away. Internal logs confirmed his route and returned to base, still carrying the undelivered package. The delivery note included a standard remark: unsuitable delivery environment. A code used during large gatherings when secure handoff isn't possible. Explosives experts analyzed the type of packaging and the presumed detonation setup. Their conclusion: if the package had been opened at the wedding gift table, the blast wave and shrapnel would have hit a tight circle of guests within several yards. Children and elderly attendees nearby would likely have suffered fatal injuries. Preliminary estimates suggested that the number of victims could have reached dozens. Several environmental factors at the venue would have amplified the devastation. An enclosed space, proximity to glass partitions, and large gatherings near the stage and buffet area. But at the family home, where the package was finally delivered on February 23rd, only a few people were present. The delay and change of delivery location drastically reduced the potential impact. Investigators emphasized that the perpetrator had clearly planned a highly public, traumatic act during a moment of celebration. The receipt with the February 20th delivery date, surveillance footage showing the courier at the event entrance, and internal delivery logs showing the delay all painted a complete picture of a mass casualty event that almost happened. The courier's decision not to hand over the package turned out to be critical. He followed protocol, opting to hold the delivery to avoid losing the parcel in the crowd. That simple, by-the-book caution completely disrupted the intended plan, and may have saved dozens of lives by rerouting the tragedy from a packed venue to a private residence 3 days later. After his arrest, Punjalal Meher tried to construct a defense based on a single claim that he had been forced to write and send the anonymous letter. During interrogation, He repeatedly stated that an unknown man had approached him in the street, made threats, and ordered him to compose the message, or else face consequences. According to Mayer, he had nothing to do with the package and was simply a victim of coercion. But the evidence dismantled that story piece by piece. Every detail investigators uncovered contradicted his claims. The nature of the letter, the tone, the knowledge of specific details, the structure, made it clear that this was not the work of someone acting under duress. It had been too meticulously crafted, filled with information only the sender could have known. Meher's denial of authorship came across as a calculated move to buy time, not the truth. Then came the event that truly revealed who he was. In January 2019, while awaiting trial in custody, Meher staged a brazen escape attempt. During a moment when guards were escorting a group of inmates, he and several accomplices launched a coordinated attack. They struck the officers using makeshift weapons, creating chaos and confusion. In the midst of it, Meher tried to slip past security and flee the facility. The attempt was thwarted. He was apprehended and immediately placed in isolation. That episode erased any lingering image of him as a misunderstood or passive figure. It solidified his reputation as someone willing to go to extreme lengths to avoid accountability. Meher no longer looked like an innocent man caught in the wrong place. He was now seen as determined, calculating, and capable of violence. And just like that, the final illusion of his defense collapsed. The man who claimed to be a victim of circumstance was, in truth, the one who had coldly and methodically planned the crime, leaving behind evidence at every step and even trying to escape justice after his arrest. In May 2025, the trial of Punjalal Meher began. It was a massive legal undertaking. A total of 62 witnesses were called to the stand, more than 100 documents were submitted, and 51 pieces of physical evidence were presented. Among them, postal receipts, the laptop containing the letter draft, a flash drive with a deleted copy of the same file, remnants of fireworks, and scorched pages from his personal journals. Together, this evidence painted an undeniable picture of guilt. The defense team struggled to present a convincing case. They stuck to the narrative of coerced involvement and pointed to the lack of direct eyewitnesses. But every argument fell apart under scrutiny. The volume of evidence and the clear timeline built by investigators made any defense feel hollow. When the trial concluded, the judge handed down a sentence of life in prison. In his closing remarks, the judge emphasized that the root of the tragedy was envy. He stated plainly, it was jealousy over a colleague's career advancement that had spiraled into an obsession that ultimately cost innocent lives. The judge called the motive not only petty, but profoundly destructive, highlighting that for Meher, professional defeat had become more important than human life. The victim's family had mixed reactions to the sentence. Soumya's father was vocal, saying he had hoped for a capital sentence, believing that anything less failed to reflect the scale of the suffering inflicted. His mother, however, admitted the life sentence brought her some relief, but also made clear that no court ruling could bring her son back. To her, this would always be a personal tragedy that no verdict and no passage of time could ever truly heal. Rima, the lone survivor of the explosion, spent 6 years living with her in-laws. She stayed close to Soumya's parents, leaning on them for support until she was ready to rebuild. Eventually, she remarried and moved abroad, putting distance between herself and the place where the tragedy unfolded. That new chapter became her way of reclaiming a sense of safety and carving out a future no longer defined by pain. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.